Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, I want to go over a question that I got from a listener on LinkedIn. This person has taken over a team, and they were initially on part of that team and got promoted to lead that team. And they were kind of tasked with getting the performance to be better on that team because their boss or the overall organization as a whole was kind of looking at the team's performance and saying, this needs to get better. From her standpoint, as a member of the team, she never thought there was a problem. And when she would talk to the individual people on the team as a newly promoted leader, she would watch the people on the team and the work that they were doing, and it would seem like on the surface, they were doing everything right, that they were performing, that there was not much to kind of tweak. But yet the numbers or the outcomes weren't where they needed to be from a growth standpoint or an improvement over time standpoint. And that seemed very confusing to her because she didn't realize how can people do things right all the time, but yet the overall performance isn't great as a whole. And so she started to dig in and realize that, well, she was only watching these people perform when they were there, obviously. When they weren't there, she wasn't watching them. And she started to look at what the results were for their individual priorities when they weren't there, and they weren't good. They were only good when they were there. And it started to lead her to believe that, oh, okay, these people on the team all do really well at their jobs. But when they're not there, it goes out the window, and whoever is there, that thing is done really well. So on a long enough timeline, it looks like, oh, everybody's doing well. And when you look at one person, they're doing well, but yet the results aren't great because they're not being focused on unless that person's there. And I thought it's a great topic because we've seen this before on leadership teams where you focus on what you know is going to be on your review and what's important to you, and everything else kind of takes a back seat. And if a person is not there all the time, and then that takes the back seat to everybody else, that doesn't bode well for long-term outcomes.
Yeah, no, it's a great call out, and I think it's so important. I think what you're talking through in the idea of alignment is really, to me, kind of a real big pillar of culture and understanding. And like there is what we do, right? And we get asked, and as a leader, you ask of people, and as somebody who, if you work for any organization or somebody else, like you get asked to do things. So like there is what we do. And we can be really clear about what we do. What Chris and I do is we record a podcast, and we share our thoughts on the podcast, and we talk about subjects that are relevant to leadership. Okay. Well, how we do it, as far as like how Chris thinks about it, how I think about it, how we process it, how I want to highlight certain things, how he wants to provide maybe analogies or examples that are helpful in like thinking about the same thing in a different way. Like there's space to play there. And what can end up happening is, hey, the podcast got recorded. We put it out there. We talked about leadership. We have people that listen to it and subscribe to it. Great. Okay. Well, have we ever taken the time to think about, well, how long should that be? How should we go back and forth? Is there a way that we can make sure that the analogies or the stories or the examples are timely and tight? Can we make sure that we're not, we know what we want to talk about, but we don't overscript it because it needs to be authentic and real. And a lot of what we do in our podcast is talk while processing because it's real conversation. So like there's a lot of things that you can do when you start to dig into how we do things, and then are we both aligned, right? And how are we aligning these things over time? So now we're building this culture of how we do our show. It's the same thing with your teams, as far as like you're trying to create this alignment to make sure that not only are you getting the output that you want, but how it's happening when you have multiple people that have skin in the game or have a responsibility, or you've told them what you want them to do, how they're doing it collectively, how they do it together, how they're learning from one another, how they're adjusting and making pivots in the strategies. Like those things matter more, because you're then teaching them how to move together as a team while having individual responsibilities, instead of teaching them to only worry about their individual responsibilities with the belief that if they all do that, the team will win. Now, that can happen and the team can win, but the team could be better. And then what happens if you change somebody from the team? Does that individual who's only really good at that one thing, when you bring somebody else in, how are you going to make sure that you're bringing that person up to speed? So I think it's an important topic, and I think the alignment piece is critical in the larger picture of building great culture.
Right. We talk all the time about making sure that you don't give any employee a get out of jail free card because they're really good at their job, right? The idea is to make sure that everybody is good at least competent in doing the other jobs on the team, so that if in the absence of that one person, that discipline or that structure or whatever that priority is doesn't go out the window, right? If you have to train somebody new and then all of a sudden that metric or that part of the scorecard takes a big dive because the person who left was the only one who knew how to do it well, is gone, then that's a problem, right? So if you look at, I think a good analogy of this would be like, if you take like a clothing store, and you have one person who is in charge of jeans and one person who's in charge of sweaters, right? And if you look at the revenue over the course of the quarter or the year, it looks like everything's great. But then if you dive into what the revenue or the performance is on each individual day, and you see that, the jeans performed really well on the days that the person in charge of jeans was there, because everything was merchandised well, everything was folded well, the customers could find things easily. But then when they weren't there, the place where the jeans were was destroyed, and they weren't in the right place, so there wasn't great revenue on that day for that particular item. But the revenue was there in the other places, and so you think, okay, as a whole, it's fine. But what could it look like if, in the absence of that person on that day, the person in charge of jeans, what would it look like if the person in charge of sweaters at least was aware of the fact that the jeans still had to look good and be merchandised well, and things that could be found by customers, even in that person's absence. Now, it might not rise to the level of that person can literally take over the job of that person in a moment's notice and do everything that they do, but are they at least able to make sure that the results are there in the times when that other person isn't there, so that at the very least it can maintain in their absence, at the kind of like the actualization level, it actually doesn't change. It actually stays performing well every day, not just when that person is there. And that is only possible if there is discussion, not just with individuals about what their goals are, but discussion with the entire team about what each individual person's goals are and what the responsibilities are of everybody in the absence of that person. Even if it's just for a day or a week, or if they go on vacation, or if they depart the team altogether and someone else has to come in. You can't just not do something because someone is not there. There has to be at least like if they are there and it's at an A+ level, it can't drop to a D level when they're not there. It has to be at least at a B+ level all the time in order to maintain that over time. And if you can teach your people to take on the mantle of whatever the team's responsibilities are, or to look at the broader implications of what it looks like when everything is running smoothly, if you can kind of convince people on your team that their results of their individual metrics that they're responsible for actually get better when everybody else's is in line too, because of the experience and the journey that it creates for whoever that client or that customer is. When everything is running smoothly, the stability that creates, the feeling that the client or the customer gets when everything is running smoothly, and not just, I'm only coming here for this thing. I shouldn't engage with this organization in other things because they don't seem to be doing this well. They only do this one thing well. That is where the rubber meets the road in terms of creating an experience for whoever your clients, your customers are. And again, that's only possible if everybody kind of has a peripheral vision view of everything else going on, and not just kind of this siloed, put the blinders on, make sure that my thing is going well. Everybody else, well, that's their responsibility, and I have confidence that they'll do it. But that's great, but there's only confidence that they'll do it when they're there. When they're not there, if you're not doing it for them, or at least ensuring that it's being done well, then it will only be good when that person's there.
Yeah, no, it's a great example, and I think that what I appreciate about it is like it's not nefarious. People aren't doing things like out of necessarily like maybe ego or
Right.
I'm better than, or I want to only care about what I have. Like, no, what we're talking about here is you have a team that's functioning well. You have a team that's doing a good job, and you're trying to get them from maybe good to great, or you're trying to understand how can I have this proactive alignment? How can I pull people together? What should I be saying or doing that allows us to continue to refine what that alignment looks like, and how am I leveraging the fact that people want to work well together as a team and show them? So I think that, like, for me, that educational moment of taking the time to talk about it, to show the data, to ask their opinion, to kind of like, do they see what you see? When I put the data up in your example, if I show you, here's the sales that we have by category, by day, in the trends that we've seen over the last week or the last couple of weeks or whatever the case is, like, what do you all see in this? You know what I mean? And like helping to understand, and then saying like, hey, by the way, Chris, great job. Like you're in charge of jeans, and then when you're here Mondays and Wednesdays and Thursdays, like, you're killing it.
Yep.
Right? Like, that's exactly what I need you to do. And then, hey, great job, Lorenzo. You've got these shirts or whatever. When you're here Tuesday, Friday, Saturday, like, you're doing a phenomenal job. Like, because both of what you are doing is helping the overall elements of how we measure things, is why we're doing so well. You're both doing tremendous work. What do you think we could do? What could be different about how we approach this if, in fact, you're doing so great with jeans, you're doing so great with shirts? Like, how do we make this happen where we can have a more total impact on the customer? How can, like, if you're doing that much more in jeans, what does one or two more shirts in that time that you're there, what does that get us in our overall goal? If vice versa, if it's shirts to jeans, like, but having that dialogue, and I think talking about that to me is the real act of alignment. That's the proactive alignment. That's getting people together and then having them a part of the conversation, discussing it, sharing with them the data, and helping them to see and understand how these things play well in together. And that's a critical piece.
Right. And there has to be a what's in it for me mindset of this. Like, at the end of the day, you're not going to convince people to do things for the good of just others. Like, it'd be great if you could, but there has to be an element of how this impacts my performance if somebody else's performance is well. And that's only possible if you can kind of get people together and talk about, hey, you know what, if when I'm not here on these days, if Lorenzo is kind of taking on the mantle of the things that I'm supposed to do when I'm here, when I'm not here, if he's doing it, then how much better is my performance going to be if someone else is focusing on my things when I'm not there? And the only way to convince them to do that is to say, hey, when you're not here and I'm going to do the same thing for you. I'm going to jump in and make sure that your things are done also when you're not here, and you're going to do that for me. And if we just focus on what we're supposed to focus on, then it is only going to give us the outcomes we're looking for on the days or the times that we're there. And to just say to one person, hey, I need you to, when Lorenzo, when you're not here, Chris, I need you to, do all the sweaters when Lorenzo's not here. Well, wait a minute. I'm in charge of jeans. How would you expect me to make sure all the jeans are done well if I'm now focusing on Lorenzo's sweaters? It's like, well, just, what about the days when you're not here and Lorenzo is here? What if you could rely on him to do the same thing for you when you're not here? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, so you're saying this is actually better for me if I kind of think holistically as a team and not just on my individual outcomes or whatever the scorecard is that's on my review. There's an example that I've used on the podcast several times. I used to work in a retail organization where the first thing I did when I got there was I looked at who the leader was that day, because if the leader was the operations leader and they were in charge of making sure that labor was in line, then I knew that everybody was going to be sent home early because they were trying to keep labor in check. And if the person in charge was scorecarded on revenue, then I knew that no one was going to be sent home early, and we're going to be finding other things to do around the store to get things done, because you want to make sure that nobody's gone because if that customer comes in, we want to make sure the revenue has every chance possible to get lifted. And if the actions from the leaders change based on who's there that day and what the priorities are, you're going to see a real world change in how the employees act and interact with each other. They will adopt the priorities of whatever leader is there that day. And if you can get it to a standpoint where all the employees have the same focuses and all the employees operate the same way, regardless of who is there, then it doesn't matter who's there. Like the priorities are the priorities, and they're all of them. All the things are equally important. And the only way to ensure that those things are still happening, even in the absence of that one person, is to make sure that everybody believes that these are priorities all the time, not just when that one person is there.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, this episode's 1 Minute Hack has two components to it. The first is about alignment and education, and the second is around execution. From alignment and education standpoint, it starts with making sure that all of the people that report to you and all of the people that you are peers with are able to take on the priorities of each other in the absence of each other, and knowing what to do in order to make sure that those outcomes are well, and that you're not sacrificing your own outcomes in order to hype up somebody else's or to put somebody else's up. That is something that everybody can count on, because they're not the only ones doing it. Everybody's doing it, not just one person. So no one ever feels like they are sacrificing their own outcomes in order to help somebody else's outcomes. That has to be shared amongst everybody, and that starts with having discussions with people, not just individually, but as a team. And then when it comes to execution, it matters the words that you say as a leader. And if you're talking about priorities that have nothing to do with you, if you're talking about, if I'm in charge of jeans and I'm talking about sweaters, then the people who are listening to me are getting the impression that, oh, Chris isn't just the jeans guy, he's the store guy, right? Lorenzo isn't just the sweaters guy, he's the store guy. They're both looking at the overall outcomes, not just what's important to them. And that has to happen over a long enough period of time. The words from each individual person and the way that you talk to your people, that all needs to align all the time, so that your people get the impression that this isn't just, you're not paying it lip service. The expectations of them are the same, regardless of who's there. And over a long enough timeline, you will eliminate this feeling that, each person has different priorities and each person focuses on their own thing. So me as an employee, I just have to do what's important to that person. Instead, now I'm doing what's important to the store, regardless of who's there.
Yeah, I think it's I think that element of alignment and what we're talking through is like truly an alignment around how we work together and how we understand how there's always going to be spaces where the responsibilities will be spread and where people will have different priorities and where people will have responsibilities that are given to them that are specific to the work that they have to do. But I think in most all industries and most all places, outside of just things where you are just the only person that does this thing, but when you are in a team-based environment for any purpose at all, being able to understand and work through how you get your priorities done with the help of others, but also in a space where you're helping them. Like that's really what we're talking about here, is like the importance of building that out in a team, and making sure that the team understands that like this is about us working together. And yes, we all have individual things that we have to accomplish, but knowing that you're a part of a bigger picture, knowing that your work can not only impact the things that you are directly responsible for, but the things that other people are responsible for, and the vice versa of working together to make that happen, I think is a critical component to really building great teamwork culture. And then as you continue to work in your leadership or elevate your leadership or get into a leadership role, you then realize the importance of having teams that function that way. And then as you, again, as you elevate, you tend to have less and less direct impact on the people doing the actual thing that needs to happen. And you find yourself in spaces where you're leading leaders who are leading leaders. And really now this is about getting people to really truly work together. in a space where they are even more directed around what are the things that they are responsible for, but getting them to work well together and support one another and do it for the betterment of the larger strategy for the organization or for the customer or the client or whatever you have. That's just a major element of leadership in building of great culture.
Right, for sure. And what you'll find if you do this correctly is on a long enough timeline, your employees will stop believing that each individual leader has their own set of priorities. And instead, they will kind of stop even being able to tell which leader is in charge of what thing. They'll stop being able to think, oh, this is the person who's in charge of jeans or sweaters, or this is the person who's in charge of revenue versus labor. But instead, all these people are in alignment working together, and now my actions as an employee need to align with those with the words coming out of the leadership team's mouth. And when it's done correctly, the overall outcomes over a long enough timeline, you'll start to see that it's not just, oh, the numbers are great overall, but you'll be able to dig into each individual day or week and see that there isn't these, ebbs and flows of performance based on what person is there, or, who was kind of taking up the mantle for that thing that day, because in that person's absence, somebody else will. You can count on that. And if you can count on that, then you'll start to see individual leaders feeling a sense of personal responsibility in helping their peers because it's being done for them in their absence.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And come join us for a special edition episode on Thursday. Have a great day.